Good afternoon and welcome back to the podcast. It's a Friday, very gloomy weather, but we're inside regardless of the weather nowadays. We're in a very weird time. Glad to have you with us. I'm Marcus, your host, of course, and joining me as usual, Shawnee and Retta. Today for you, we have our perceived team of the decades from two different perspectives, of course. So loads to talk about in today's show, and I hope you guys enjoy that kind of content. Team of the decade, basically the preferred starting 11, and I'm guessing the bench as well, that these two gentlemen prefer over the last 10 years at Manchester United. So that includes all players. But I'm pretty sure there is no doubt Lingard makes it into any of these teams. But we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Lingard and Perez, my midfield. You know what I mean?
Oh, my God. Okay, let's get into it.
Bro, I'm telling you, I'm tuning off. If that's true, I'm tuning off.
Okay, buddy. What have we got, man? What have we got?
We'll start with the goalkeeper. I was actually kind of shocked by the goalkeeper option, but both of us decided on David De Gea.
Really?
Yeah, and I feel like I picked De Gea because, this decade, I feel like, he did win a Premier League, and, this guy has been phenomenal for many years in this decade. And, like I said, I still rate David De Gea. I think he's been a brilliant goalkeeper. I think it's just unfortunate in the scenario he finds himself in. But for me, David De Gea is definitely going to be my first team goalkeeper for the team of the decade.
Interesting.
Yeah. Look, for the last decade, definitely De Gea. Like, Van der Sar was a brilliant goalkeeper, but towards the beginning of the decade, he was kind of on the decline. De Gea in the last decade has been phenomenal. Player of the season after season for Manchester United. He's carried us through our tough times. Now, yes, we have a better defense, so maybe we don't need him as much as we used to, but at a point, he was our everything. When we got into top four, he got us into top four because he'd win so many points for us from nothing. So, definitely De Gea for the last decade.
That's interesting, man. That's interesting. Let us know in the comments down below what you think of the first entry.
Because I must say, I do love Van der Sar. Don't get me wrong. Van der Sar could be probably one of my favorite keepers of all time. I do love the guy, but I think this is some respect I got to put today, and I think he deserves this.
All right, right back. Who are we going with?
Right back. Sorry, before we go there, if we're talking overall, yeah, it's a different conversation. But for the last decade, I feel like it'd be unfair not to put De Gea.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we all have different opinions,
Yeah, I know.
But
just like the next one, the right back, obviously, Pino one season, but Malota and I both again. This man, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, hasn't even been here for a full season yet. But, like I said, I love this guy. I think he's titanium. I just don't think this guy he doesn't get broken down much. And yeah, this guy, like I said, I watched him from Palace as well. Obviously, I don't want to count his Palace career in. But me, I love Wan-Bissaka. I really do. And he would be my right back if I had to make a team of the decade.
Interesting.
Yeah, this was a difficult one for me. I think the hardest one in the whole starting 11. I think I was trying very hard to keep it in the last decade because that's what this is about. Overall, you would say Gary Neville beats him because Gary Neville's been here longer and overall he had more attributes. But in the last decade, around 09, 010, Neville was a bit injury prone. Yes, he was captain, but he was a bit injury prone. He wasn't playing that much. And then Wes Brown were coming for him. And Wes Brown, look, he was a good replacement, but he wasn't a world class. He wasn't as fantastic as I'd say Wan-Bissaka. He did have his mistakes. So this guy has been consistent throughout the whole season. He's our most consistent player. And for that, I think he deserves to be in this team.
Interesting to say the least. Get down in the comments down below. Tell us what you think. Who are we going with the centre-back pairing?
Centre-back again. Malot and I have no arguments who the centre-back pairing is. It's these two
I don't
gentlemen.
think anyone has any arguments.
I don't think any United fan has a debate over these two. Ferdinand and Vidic. This duo at the centre-back pairing was... I got no words for them. They were amazing. They could score goals. There was leadership. And they were just solid. They were rocks. They would break everyone. They would hold that whole back line. And you know what? These guys, they're irreplaceable, man.
Definitely.
I think possibly the best pairing the Premier League has seen. And that's a huge thing to say. but I think so. I think they just complement each other so well. Like Ferdinand could read the game really well, and he was really quick, so that worked in his favor. And if you had to find a weakness in Vidic's game, you could say it was the pace. So Ferdinand would cover for that. And then when you come to Vidic was the best defender in the world at his prime. I could compare him to Van Dijk now. In the air, he was brilliant. Reading the game was brilliant. Tackling was brilliant. He scores goals. He was just out of this world. And this pairing was unstoppable.
Yeah, and unlike Van Dijk, you won a Premier League. No, I agree with it. But who are we going with left back?
Left back again, left back, I feel like, over the years, there hasn't really been someone outstanding. But this man, again, Molota and I both agreed on Patrice Evra. I love the guy, He's a Man United through and through. This guy was a leader. This guy had pace. This guy could put a cross in. This guy could score a goal when he has to. He read the game very well. I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson loved this guy as well. He loved Patrice Evra. He's seen something in Evra that, the fans started to see over time. And you know what? This guy, over the years at United, he just showed season after season what class he is.
Yeah, definitely.
He had a really good balance. He's not like modern day footballers or attacking, but defensively are pretty crap. He could score goal when he needed to. He could cross the ball, but defensively he was solid. And defense was his number one attributes, like positioning, reading of the game. His tackles were brilliant. So he was, as Srini said, I think there hasn't been anyone who's been outstanding for both fullback positions, to be honest. There hasn't been anyone who was outstanding, but I feel like he made this position his own and was the number one guard there for a very long time.
Yeah, and Patrice Evra, he was also that guy who seldom out of United players. He was that guy who gets in like World 11s. He was nominated for the best team of the years in the Ballon d'Or ceremonies and all that. This guy held left back position.
Yeah, picked season after season by Alex Ferguson. He was never dropped.
100%.
Yeah, I don't think there's any arguments about him. There's no
argument so far. Yeah, there's no argument so far. I must just clarify that Molota and I both decided to do a 4-4-2 because I think that formation worked best for what we wanted. So I have 4-4-2, and then our centre mid again. No arguments from this guy. Probably one of the greatest midfielders to ever play the game. Paul Scholes, my guy. This guy, he's probably also one of the most underrated midfielders to ever have been in the game. Paul Scholes was amazing. And when I was, growing up, I was obviously watching Paul Scholes. And, Scholes was just the things he could do, the passing of Scholes, the shots he can pull out of the bag, out of the draw. It's top class. He was nothing but a professional. He always kept his head down. He did what he had to do, and he was world class. You asked people like Iniesta, obviously, you have interviews like with Iniesta and them saying who's one of the best players you ever played against. They all say Paul Scholes because that's how good he was. And, class can see class. And when you have a player that's like Iniesta, Xavi, and all those Barca guys saying that Paul Scholes is one of the toughest players they've come up against, it just shows how good he was.
What to you made Paul Scholes so good? What single attribute made him better than any other midfielder you watched, in your words?
In my words, it's like, for me, what makes Paul Scholes brilliant is that he was so good at everything, Like he was an all-rounder at everything. Shooting, passing. He could lead if he wanted to on the field, but he was a quiet guy off the field. He was humble. There was never problems with Paul Scholes. You just he did his job and he did it very, very well as a midfielder. And especially back in the times, back those days where you had to pick up the pass more, you didn't really need so much pace. This guy was the man for the job.
Yeah.
Look, maybe I haven't seen enough CDMs over the years, but this guy is the best CDM I've ever seen play. Like, he was complete defensively, out of this world, and that wasn't just it. Like, it was like combining, maybe not say Kante, because Kante is brilliant at defending, but Paul Scholes was pretty good at defending, but like combining Kante and Lampard, and you get a Paul Scholes, because you could do the passing, the long-range passing, the short passing, the goals, sometimes from his head, and defensively, he was brilliant. One of the most complete midfielders I've ever seen.
Yeah, so, Paul Scholes could read a game better than most people could ever dream of. That's one thing I give Paul Scholes. Like, he could read situations very, very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Who are you putting next to him is the real question.
These are the questions. Now, this is where Malot and I both went for different players next to Paul Scholes. Maloto went for Michael Carrick, and I went for one of my personal favorites, Ji-Sung Park. Now, I'll explain why I picked Ji-Sung Park because, I feel like, if you need an engine, the guy who works and the workhorse, the proper engine, will do
Yeah.
all the work that, all the crap work that no one else wants to do. Proper CDM. And he can go forward as well. It's Ji-Sung Park. And, the way Evra also speaks about Park is that Evra also once said that, he feels Park is one of the most underrated players at United. Because personally, Evra said that Ji-Sung Park is probably the best player he's played with at United because this guy, he did everything. He ran everywhere. He got the ball from everyone. I think also, this is obviously not going to be a great example, but Mark Aldridge from the United stand also, I think he went to go play at Old Trafford once, and Ji-Sung Park was there, I think. And Mark said he was clear on goal, and before he knew it, Jason Park just came and stole it off him. And so, class never leaves you. And I think Jason Park was such a hard worker, and he was underseen because obviously he's not a big name. He didn't do spectacular things, but this guy, he would run the defense. He would run up and down for the whole 90 minutes, and he would never give up. This guy was solid for me.
Mm-hmm. No, I feel like
all I would say is, yeah, you can go first. You can go first.
No, it's fine.
No, you can go first.
Yeah.
So am I going or am I not going? You can go, Chief. Go.
Okay, sure. I agree with Shane, and he was brilliant, but I feel like Carrick was out of this world. I feel like if you want to talk about the modern CDM, the Pep kind of CDM, this is the guy who's in Pep's dreams. It's Carrick. Carrick was good defensively, but in terms of his work on the ball, he could control a game. In terms of his distribution, out of the world, the milk and sugar we used to like calling him. He was brilliant, and I think at his prime I put him in a world class record, so he deserves to be in this team.
See, there really is two types of United fans, or two types of football fans, I should say, because I agree with Ji-Sung Park 100%, at least in a 4-4-2. If this was a 4-3-3, then yeah, put Carrick in the middle, put Scholes and put someone else next to him. But in a 4-4-2, I don't know if I'm a huge fan of Scholes and Carrick playing right next to each other. I feel like that team is firstly too slow. I mean, they probably could do it, but not in the modern game. Not a chance. I don't care how good you think Scholes is. The 4-4-2 is an outdated system. And I think you'd need someone who's quick and who's an engine, who works hard, who's willing to run into the spaces and do the hard work, like Ji-Sung Park, next to Scholes. Because Scholes can read the game, Scholes can be the IQ, and he needs the brawn next to him in a 4-4-2. Now, you may not agree with that, but show me a team that successfully plays the 4-4-2 in the modern game with two slow midfielders. And I'll show you no team.
Not 4-4-2 anymore. That doesn't happen because they don't play the formation.
That's what I said. Yeah.
But I feel like Scholes was pretty quick. I think he could do the job. I think they were just so good that it would work. I think that even if they're not the most creative players, even if there's no CAM, but they're pretty creative. And if I have to pick an example with two midfielders like this, yes, even though they had wing backs, Chelsea under Conte, I think they did it pretty well with Matic and Kante.
That's not a 4-4-2 though. That's a different formation.
And what I would say about that is that, Kante is very quick. He's like a Ji-Sung Park, I would say. More like a Ji-Sung Park than a Carrick.
And again, that's not a 4-4-2. I'm talking specifically about a 4-4-2. I'm not saying this pairing would not work in any other formation. I'm talking about a 4-4-2. I personally would take Ji-Sung Park next to Scholes in a 4-4-2 over Carrick and Scholes in the modern game, personally. And if you're going to argue with that, me and you can't talk because I don't know what your angle is. Show me a team that successfully plays 4-4-2.
I can agree with that because 4-4-2 is not playing anymore. So
yeah, I really didn't You can lube up your favorite legends all you want, but you have to realize that even your legends have kryptonite. They have weaknesses. They're not perfect. Otherwise, they would have won the Ballon d'Or every season. So the reality, actually, the Ballon d'Or is more skewed towards attacking players anyway, so that's probably not true. But the point that I'm trying to make is in a 4-4-2, I wouldn't go with that with Carrick next to Scholes. I'd put one of them in because I think they're both phenomenal players, and I think Carrick is the more underrated one in between those two, in my personal opinion. But it's all about opinion.
But compare Carrick to any player right now, I'd say, and Carrick is much better than him. But in terms of attributes, I'd say he's like Jorginho.
Yeah, it's very seldom you get a player like Carrick now. Carrick is a very unique player.
Mm.
Yeah, he was a unique player that worked in a very specific system. The thing is, when people talk about their favorite legends, and I don't like to offend people, but when people talk about their favorite legends, they seldom include who they played next to and why that team worked so well. You never hear about the great players that played for Stoke City or the great players that played from West Brom. It's always the great players that played in treble winning sides and why they were so good. And nobody ever talks about the system they played and the tactics that allowed their attributes to shine. You put Michael Carrick in a lot of other teams in the world, and he goes from underrated to average. We've seen this with Fernandinho. If you don't believe me, we've seen this with Fernandinho. Why did Fernandinho suddenly become one of the best CDMs in the world when Pep got there? But before Pep got there, he was nothing.
Yeah.
And
But like
we see this
like
time and time again. You put
yeah,
Carrick
like you
anywhere
compare
else.
you compare other United players. Usually like with the Wes Browns, the Andersons. They were
Yeah,
amazing in the system
yeah,
they played, and then they got more Premier League trophies than all of Liverpool.
yeah. I'm not
But
even
they're not
talking about those
amazing.
players though. With
But
those players,
I'm
it's,
just
it's
saying
pretty
examples like
obvious.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're 100% right. But with the Andersons, with the Lee Browns, it's pretty obvious. The Quinton Fortunes, it's pretty obvious what the situation is there, and I don't think anyone can hide behind that unless you really got thick skins. But I'm talking about some of the greats, and a lot of people will be offended by that because a lot of people don't want to hear that. For example, I'm trying to think of a good example now besides Carrick. A lot of people don't want to hear that Vidic might not have worked as well if he didn't have Rio Ferdinand next to him. People don't want to hear that because they think Vidic is invincible, and it's a load of nonsense because you have to consider the teams that these guys played in. Manchester United wasn't Carrick, Manchester United wasn't Scholes. It was a team led by, in many eyes, one of the greatest managers of all time, with a perfect working system for that team. And everyone who came in and worked hard to get their name on the team sheet did what they had to do, and very well. Players like Park Ji-sung, or Ji-sung Park,
Yeah, just,
who was incredible hard workers. Players like Nani, who when they left United, they were nothing.
yeah.
But when they were at United, all of a sudden, they're so good,
Mm.
But that's just my opinion, That's just my opinion.
Nice. 100%.
I'm surprised I didn't see Paul Pogba in this midfield, but
We will get there.
no. The reason, let me say why. I'm surprised because I've seen players like Aaron Wan-Bissaka here, but not Paul Pogba. That's why I'm surprised. You guys included Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who's only been here for 6 months. I thought you'd include Paul Pogba since you think he's so good and he get into any team and he's worth 125 million pounds and he's won a World Cup. I thought you guys would include him there. So I'm shocked. I must say I'm shocked.
I put it down strictly to stats. Like it was all stats. In terms of the last decade, he's played almost as many games or as many games as Gary Neville did because Gary Neville was at the end of his career. And then Wes Brown was just not that good. So overall, and I don't think Raphael was amazing. I don't think he's anywhere close. So overall, I think Wan-Bissaka wins the battle.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I don't fully agree with that logic, but that makes sense because in the last 6 months, yeah, Aaron Wan-Bissaka has been better, but he's only been here for 6 months. So, can I put Bruno in because his stats have been amazing in the last 2 months compared to some of our midfielders?
Okay, fine. But if the player who was number 2 played almost as many games as him in the last decade, what's the difference though?
The difference is that player still has won probably more trophies. Has proven in the past that he is a better player. Maybe those stats in the past don't count to this decade, but that skill didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, true.
If I want to make an argument, look here. Let me put it in this way. If I want to prove to you that Gary Neville is a better right back than Aaron Wan-Bissaka, I don't have to bring his stats up. I can tell you that he's won a Champions League. It may not have been in the last decade, but the fact that he has won a Champions League is proof that he can win trophies. Aaron Wan-Bissaka hasn't done that. So the argument there is done. It's squashed without including the stats. There's proof on his CV. And that's what I mean. I'm surprised Paul Pogba didn't make it into this team because he's so great in some United eyes fans, some United fans' eyes. And if you compare him with Carrick in this decade and Paul Pogba in this decade, some people would say Paul Pogba's better, especially if you're not a United fan. And I wouldn't call you crazy for saying that because Paul Pogba's done some amazing things. But why don't you apply the same logic to other people?
Look, I was putting it strictly to this decade. Anything outside that, no way. If I did that, definitely Gary Neville. Wan-Bissaka stands no chance. But strictly to this decade, it just didn't make sense to me.
I know, and that makes complete sense. But that's what I'm saying. I'm surprised Paul Pogba didn't make it in because Paul Pogba probably has achieved more than some of the United midfielders in this small decade. What did Carrick do in the last 2 years that Paul Pogba hasn't done?
Carrick, in the decade, maybe not at the end of the decade, but at the beginning of the decade, he was a mainstay in this team. Game in, game out, he was playing. He was one of the main players with Paul Scholes and Ji-Sung Park. So I disagree
Isn't
with
Paul
that.
Pogba one of the best midfielders in the Premier League in the last decade, according to you guys statistically?
No, not
according to you guys.
Me. According to me, he has the talent, but he's not consistent enough to be put in that bracket. He can be. He has the talent to be a De Bruyne, but he's not a De Bruyne.
So to you, Paul Pogba is not one of the best midfielders statistically in the Premier League, even though you said that on this podcast.
In the last few seasons, okay, I can agree with that. But in the last decade, no.
Yeah. So in the last few seasons, right? In the last few seasons, Paul Pogba's been the best midfielder.
I can't agree with that, no.
Was Carrick one of... Okay, so take those last few seasons and compare them to Carrick's last few seasons in this decade. You're saying Carrick was better?
Not last few, no. Beginning, definitely.
See? But,
But
it's
I
just...
think the beginning overshadows the end. I think the beginning overshadows the end because Carrick was more consistent. So consistency has to come into play now, in terms of my pick.
Yeah, I get that completely. Right, I do. Right, I get that completely. And I respect that. But then when you spoke, like, it just, you know what? I'm going to leave it. Wasting time. This is not what the show's about. You're right. I'm wrong. Cool. Let's move on. Let's go left mid. Who's in the left mid position?
Now, I was actually surprised. And actually, I'm not surprised, but I was kind of surprised Malota left him out. Malota chose 90, and I chose Ryan Giggs because there wasn't even a question about him. Me on the left side.
Same logic.
Ryan Giggs.
I would also go with Ryan Giggs, but I guess people have different opinions. I don't really have much to say.
What I will say about Nani is I feel he is very underrated. I really do think Prime Nani was absolutely amazing. Like, if you're a stats person, I seen a stat sheet on the other day on Twitter that he scored the same amount of goals and had more assists than like a prime Cristiano Ronaldo at United. But obviously Nani hasn't been rated that highly. But, I do think Nani is underrated. I do think he's a legend of this club and he was amazing. He was phenomenal in the system he had to play. But for me, every day of the week, it's Ryan Giggs. He had pace. This guy had a pass. He had a shot. This guy could do everything. Ryan Giggs.
The reason why Nani was so underrated is because after he left United or before he came to United, he was really fuck all in the grander scheme of things. No offense to Nani. Compared to some of the greats, that is.
Yeah.
I think it's really because of the person he was replacing. He was replacing Cristiano Ronaldo. So always there was a shadow above him that you're not as good as Cristiano Ronaldo, even if it was not said, but subconsciously people would think that because Ronaldo just left. And into the Giggs, look, Giggs is probably the best left wing we've had at this club, but he was aging. He was not at his best anymore. He was benching a lot around this time. And Nani was playing more games, chipping in more goals. Skills, he was amazing. And he was a brilliant outlet for United. Maybe not the best left wing in the world, but I think the best we had at that time.
Yeah, see, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking those 4 seasons we had Nani and a Giggs. I would still pick Giggs. I think Giggs was still better at the time. I think Giggs offered us more than Nani at those times. I think his passing was still better. I think his shot was still better. He was still a leader. I didn't really see Nani as a leader.
He was a leader, definitely. But he was doing a lot of that from the bench. And I think the stats, I could be wrong, but I think the stats, Nani wins that.
2 seasons, 2 seasons Ryan Giggs played. So the 10 and 11 season, he was good. And then, from 12 to 13, it started dipping where he was becoming more of a squad player.
Yeah.
Because of age.
All I'll say is stats come down to interpretation anyways. I'm not much of a stats guy. I just throw stats in people's faces because I know there's people out there who throw stats in my faces. So I throw it back in their faces just so that they can shut up. But I never make an argument purely based on stats because stats come down to interpretation. if someone has won more Champions Leagues, it could be because they were just playing in a better team. Doesn't mean that they were a better player. If somebody had more goals and more
doesn't mean
assists,
I'm right, because I think that's.
Yeah, no, I wasn't even targeting you. I'm just saying in general. I'm just saying for anyone who's listening. Like, for example, look here. If someone has more goals and more assists than another player, there's so many factors into that, man. Like, the amount of times players, even in this season, the amount of times someone like Aaron Wan-Bissaka, for example, could have had way more assists if we just had a decent striker who could hit the ball and get on the end of crosses is mental.
Yeah, it's like the stat I made with Nani. When I seen on Twitter, he had more goals and assists than Cristiano Ronaldo. At the same time, they were both at United.
Yeah.
But like, you're going to tell me Nani is better than Ronaldo?
Yeah, so it's just one of them things, It's just one of them things. And I'm not a person who's too bothered about stats. I know they're there, and I know you can gather a lot of information from them. But I always like to poke people's brains and get into people's minds and try to figure out why they think the stat is so important, and show them that it might not be as reflective as they think it is.
Definitely. But I think it's definitely down to perspective. I think it depends on what you value more.
Yeah, and in terms of Nani and Giggs, I don't know. I would personally go with Ryan Giggs, but I don't know. I can't conclusively say that I think one is better than the other because, I'm in awe of both of them.
Well,
and
I was never young, but that's a real principle.
Definitely.
I have to compare Nani to any player now. I'd say, I think Nani has proven himself more, but I'd say Memphis Depay.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. Memphis hasn't accomplished as much as Nani.
Yeah.
But I can see why you say that.
Yeah, Memphis is an odd one because I judge Memphis on his time at United because I don't watch Memphis elsewhere.
That's the sad thing, and I loved Memphis in the game.
Yeah, so to me, Memphis is a crap player, and that doesn't mean it's true, but that from my perspective, he's a crap player because when I saw him play, he was crap. So I'm gonna call him crap, and if that rubs you the wrong way, I'm sorry. I really couldn't care to tune into the French league or wherever he plays now. So I don't know. I'll just take your word for it that he's a good player, but the Memphis is a weird example. But yeah. Speaking of Nani and Memphis, my problem with Nani over the years, and the reason why I personally have never held him to the same regard as a Ryan Giggs, as a Gary Neville, as a Paul Scholes, etc., is because with some of these other players, most of their career was spent at United, so they didn't have to move anywhere else, and they didn't have to prove themselves anywhere else. They kind of just did it here, and they won so many trophies. With Nani, I think he came at a very unfortunate time. As you said, he was here to replace Cristiano Ronaldo, which is kind of tough. And on top of that, I feel like when Nani left and before Nani came here, we never really knew what Nani was about. Obviously, there's people who would have watched him at Sporting or wherever he came from and would have said, this guy's a good player. But for the most part, there were some of us, including myself, who were a bit ignorant towards players like Nani, who were coming from smaller leagues. And when he got here, sure, he lit things up. But it's like when he left, we didn't really notice after a few years, I kind of sometimes forget that Nani played for United. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy played for United and he was good, but it doesn't come to my mind first. When I think of old United teams, it's always the Evras, it's always the Giggs, it's always, the Tevez, it's always all these great players. And for some reason, I don't know if I can put Nani in the same regard just because I've never seen him do it anywhere else, or I haven't seen him at United long enough. He doesn't feel like, I don't know, he just doesn't have the same pedigree. And that's unfortunate because I know Nani was a good player.
That's a good way. Like, the pedigree between the two players.
That's the thing. Pedigree counts a lot.
I think modern day wingers are different, and those are very few players back in the day who were like modern day wingers. Like, there was a few, but like I think it's way more now. That you get wingers who are relied on so much to score goals, like a Cristiano Ronaldo, maybe a Leroy Sané now. But back then, especially when Nani was playing, all the goals were from the strikers, and he had to chip in other areas, but he was still a prominent part of the team.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know Nani was a great player, but for me, I think it just comes down to pedigree, really. I've never overanalyzed a player's ability and said, oh, he can do a rainbow flick into a bicycle kick, therefore he's better than X a player. No, that's not what it's about. When I compare legends, it's for me, there's always a biasness towards guys who have pedigree. That's why I pick Ryan Giggs. I see the Champions League trophy. I see the Premier League trophy in his hands, and I'm like, well, obviously I'm going to take the champion over the guy from Sporting, That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. You see the glory. It's the same with managerial arguments. Why would you put Poch in the bracket of best manager in the world when he hasn't won a trophy? Pedigree. So it's the same thing, you know. It's about pedigree for me. With old players at least. Obviously now that I have more of an analytical mind, and I'm not a kid who's in awe of the Manchester United crest and the Champions League trophies, and I can actually see the game and formulate my own opinions without us even lifting trophies. Obviously now I can look at a player's skill and see what they offer more. And looking back on it, Nani was definitely a great player, and that's why I say it's unfortunate that I don't hold him in the same regard as a Ryan Giggs, because he was a phenomenal player in his prime. It's just I didn't see any of that after he left United, and maybe that's because I didn't watch him enough. But you know, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, and it's not just him, by the way. Players like Kagawa as well after they left United. Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Kagawa was never amazing at United either.
Yeah.
He wasn't amazing at United either, but Kagawa was one of those players that I personally liked a lot. And when he left United, I thought he was going to go somewhere else and do well and prove everyone wrong, and he didn't. And it was just like, I know what this guy has in him, but he just hasn't shown it long enough, and he doesn't have the pedigree. So I'll never mention him, you know, as one of the greats. Kagawa was actually a very good example because I liked him, and I still don't hold him in the same regard as some of the good midfielders who played here. I actually think Chi-Sung Park was better, 10 times better. But anyways, moving on. Right wing.
Yes, the right midfielder, you know, the right man. Now, disclaimer. Right, disclaimer. I love the guy Malota chose. Love him to bits. Not many people know he was one of my favorite United players at the time. For me, he was my runner-up for right back, Ewan. He's possibly my favorite captain over this last decade at United. And it was really tough for me to leave him out. But I must say, I love Malota put this player in. I really do. I think he does deserve a lot of credit. But for me, obviously, when you see my selection, you could understand why I didn't pick Antonio Valencia. And I went with my boy, Paul Pogba.
Now that becomes very... But wait. Paul Pogba doesn't play on the right wing.
No, he's the right. I'm playing on the right mid. I had to put him in my team. I had to.
Hey,
I
yeah,
think Paul Pogba could play right. I really think Paul Pogba could play right.
Not his best position.
Nah. Prime Ashley Young is better than Paul Pogba on the right wing. Nah. Prime Ashley Young is better than him on the right wing. Valencia is better than him on the right wing. Prime Memphis Depay is better than him on the right wing. Heck, Rashford is better than Pogba on the right wing because Rashford has actually done it. Nah. I know why you did it, but nah. This is why you need to change your formation, Chief. This is why you need to play a 4-3-3.
I wanted
for
to play a 4-3-3,
like this.
but I was like, you know, Malone to play a 4-4-2. I was like, okay, I'll work around it. You know, Paul Pogba is going to tend to
You
miss.
should have just done a formation sheet then.
You know,
Nah.
Man was spoke for choice. That's what happened.
Nah.
Yeah,
I can't have it. I don't know if I could agree with Valencia, but in this picture, I'm going to pick Valencia over Pogba in that position any day. But, you know, yeah, I've got nothing else to say except hell nah for that right picture.
Like, before I go to why I think Valencia should go there, who else though? To be fair, who else?
So there is a few. You can play around with it. You can put Nani and Giggs in the same team. You're telling me Nani can't play on the right better than Pogba?
Yes, definitely better.
Prime Nani can definitely do a better job than Paul Pogba. And some people would argue that Prime Nani has more to offer than Valencia. Some people would have put Valencia at right back. Some people would have said
he was my runner-up for right back. If it wasn't for Wan-Bissaka, he was 100% my right back.
Yeah, I would have put him there 100% because I don't believe in putting people who've only been here for 6 months in the team of the decade. But that's just my opinion. But I would have never put Valencia in right mid anyways. There were so many other candidates. It makes so much more sense tactically, and both as a United fan who's watched this team for such a long time, to put an actual winger, even if he was playing on the wrong side, than a person who played right back in this decade.
Yeah, I understand.
Or a person who plays centre mid.
If everyone knows me, you know, I'm going to be a bit of a hypocrite here. But, like, you know, on paper and everything, I couldn't leave Paul Pogba for this team. I just couldn't.
That's the whole point of the team of the decade. That's why it's so fun. You have to put players in their positions, and if there's someone who competes and is better, you leave them out. That's the whole point, you know.
Yeah, but you, like, you know, with me, it's just...
Why don't we put Van der Sar in striker? Because we don't want to leave Van der Sar at the team. Why don't we do that? Why don't we put
Yeah, but
Gary
that's
Neville?
what I was gonna say. I was gonna say that I honestly think Paul Pogba is so good he could play in any midfield position. And if he had to play right mid, I think he could do a job still.
Look,
He's
Paul
got
Pogba
pace.
could
He's
play
got
in any
technique. He could
midfield
put a cross
position.
in. He could still shoot
Look,
from that side. I think,
look.
and it's on his stronger foot. So I think Paul Pogba would be amazing.
Paul Pogba is a professional footballer. If you give Paul Pogba 6 weeks to learn how to play in any position, he will. But is Paul Pogba the best right winger of the decade? No, fam.
I
No.
definitely think it'll happen. Yeah. Look, I think Paul Pogba will do a decent job, but then there's a very good chance he'll end up drifting in the midfield because Paul Pogba is a midfielder. And you can't be telling me Paul Pogba's going to be there sticking by the wing, running down the channel. I just don't see it. And I think there hasn't been anyone, like the right wing position has been a problem for us for a very long time. And ever since he was holding it, he had the number 7 shirt. At a point, he was our number 1 right wing.
He was.
He was shipping in a lot in goals. And then he started declining. And after that, we just never had a right wing after that. And to make it worse, he went into right back and did a job. He was phenomenal.
But he was damn good at it.
He was captain as well. So I think he deserves to be in this team.
Yeah, Valencia deserves to be in this team. I have got no problem.
More importantly, he actually played in the position in the last decade. More importantly. But yeah, you know what? It is what it is. Let's move on.
It is what it is, boys. I couldn't do it, guys. You never know when Marcus is talking about, guys, I don't know why Paul Pogba is in this team. I was there like, shh. I was like, shh.
Yeah, no,
Please,
like put him in the midfield. What? You know what? Anyways, let's move on. It's about opinion.
That's the thing. Here's the thing. Does he get in the midfield over Shini's other 2 choices?
I would put him over Jason.
Yeah, look.
I would put this guy over Schools, guys. That's how biased I am.
Listen, can I be honest with you? If you're going to put Aaron Wan-Bissaka in this Manchester United team on the premise that Gary Neville's last few seasons at the team in this decade were atrocious and he didn't play that much, so that warrants him out of the team, and you're going to take a guy who's only been here for 6 months and say, yeah, he deserves to be in a team of the decade, then fuck yeah, I'd put Paul Pogba in, because I can say the statistics and the pedigree of Paul Pogba is far more impressive than Michael Carrick, who's on the decline and he's playing in a Manchester United team that is already great even without him. Even though you say he was holding it together, that Manchester United team had great players anyways. Fuck yeah. I think it's more impressive to play in a broken United team and have the statistics that Paul Pogba has.
Plus, you look at everyone we put in this team of the decade, none of them has got a World Cup. Or maybe they have, but none of them has got a World Cup other than Paul Pogba.
None of them have a World Cup, but moving away from that, none of them played at Juventus and got amazing statistics like Paul Pogba did. None of them played in the broken United.
Like I've always said about Paul Pogba, this guy is one of the most special midfielders ever.
None of them played in the United team.
Strength, he's got the height, he can pass, weak foot left, and if this guy is complete.
None of them played in the United team with Pereira and Lingard and still got some of the best statistics in the Premier League. None of them played in a United team where their only creative outlet was Herrera and Fellaini. None of them played in a United team that wasn't winning a treble or that wasn't being coached by Sir Alex Ferguson like Paul Pogba did. So, yeah, if you're going strictly off the last decade, Paul Pogba gets in. But pedigree does not go away just because we're focusing only on the last decade. Michael Carrick is still Michael Carrick. Michael Carrick still has won Premier League titles. And even if we don't include the actual stat of Michael Carrick winning titles, the pedigree doesn't go away. You can't just erase pedigree because you're focusing on the last 3 years. And that's my same argument with Gary Neville. Personally, I would put Gary Neville in because of the pedigree, and I don't think Aaron Wan-Bissaka qualifies. And therefore, guys like Bruno, guys like Igalo, and okay, Pogba's been here for a long time, so he actually doesn't count. But those 3 guys don't count. And I would be more inclined to put Carrick in for that reason, because Pogba hasn't gone to the same heights as a Michael Carrick yet, for me, personally. That would be my argument for not putting Paul Pogba in this team. It's nothing personal. It's just I feel like he hasn't been here long enough to cement himself in a conversation with the legends. That's just my opinion, and that opinion carries over to everyone. And I understand only focusing on the last decade. You have to put Wan-Bissaka in because Wan-Bissaka's been amazing, but I can't do it. Maybe this is my biasness coming out. I just can't do it.
No, yeah, this picture is also my bias. Like, I don't want I want to deny the other guys, but I want to Paul Pogba still in the team.
You can look at it both ways. Really. It's hard. It's difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult. look, you remember when we talked about this off air, like I was the one who mentioned Gary Neville. And I was researching and like it was so hard. I wanted to put Gary Neville, but like I couldn't because he'd only played 15 games. And like it's on the cycle played way more. So I don't know, just my personal preference.
No, that makes
Maybe
sense.
I was
That makes sense.
about
That makes sense.
yeah.
That makes sense. It's a paradox, but some paradoxes are true. You know, some paradoxes are true. Example, the yin yang is black and white, not just black or white. So some paradoxes are true. You know, you can't put Gary Neville in because he didn't play enough in this decade, but you can because the pedigree doesn't get erased. So it goes both ways, and it's down to opinion. But anyways, my response to this picture is still nah. But it is what it is. Let's go to the strikers.
The strikers. You know what? The next picture I'm about to show, right? I must say, it is one of my favorite strikers ever in the history of football. I love him. I wore his shirts growing up as a kid. You know, there was no debates between me and Maloto for the one out of two striker, and this guy is none other than Mr. Wayne Rooney.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Van Persie. Whew.
No. Wayne Rooney. Wayne Rooney, unbelievable. You don't get a striker like him these days, you know. So loyal to his club, and he bangs in after season after season. This guy scores goals. He just scores goals. He was the captain for United. He's so diverse. Even with age, he adapted. He could play cam. He could play CDM. He could play on the right mid. He could play left. This guy was amazing. Wayne Rooney, you know, is the second all-time goal scorer in the Premier League behind Alan Shearer. And then, you know, I can't leave him out of the team of the decade. Absolutely phenomenal player.
Yeah.
You see,
yeah,
now,
one can say.
Can I say something? You see now, the pedigree counts for Wayne Rooney. The pedigree doesn't count for Gary Neville. Just saying.
What do you mean, though?
Because you're talking about his entire career and how brilliant he's been as an.
But in the decade, he was amazing. You know, from 2010.
In the decade,
he
was. I'm not saying he wasn't. He was. I'm not saying he wasn't. But most of what you're saying comes from his entire career. You never mentioned anything unique about his decade. And his decade was amazing compared to some other strikers. But I'm just saying, you know, this is an example of people using pedigree, because people could say that in this decade Rooney was on the decline in comparison to his younger years, and I wouldn't disagree with him.
Yeah, I think I would say that maybe for the period from 1.5, but before that, I think Rooney was still out.
I think
goals-wise,
the thing with Rooney is
this is Premier League. Goals-wise, he scored 128 goals.
Yeah, but the thing with Rooney is there's no competition. Like, we're not comparing Rooney to a Wan-Bissaka because they don't play in the same position. Yeah. If in a situation we had a striker who had won a World Cup, who was playing at United, wasn't getting the service that he wanted to get, but was still banging in the goals, and we had to compare him to Rooney, most people would probably pick Rooney because of the pedigree.
Plus, if you also look at our strikers, like, you know, like the recent strikers, like the Rashfords, you know, Martials, it's been kind of tough.
You see, exactly. You see, so there's no competition. That's why Rooney putting Rooney in the team.
Rooney's
even
easy.
If you don't look at his pedigree, he gets in because over the last decade there's been no one like him. But I'm just saying, look at the debates we've had on the show so far. You know, Aaron Wan-Bissaka versus Gary Neville. Imagine we had a striker of the level of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, however you want to convert those stats to, in the position of striker.
Like, imagine if
would still pick
Rashford,
Rooney probably.
Like let's just say
it would have been hard.
Yeah, but most people would probably still pick Rooney because
like
Rooney.
I was just say, like, let's say in a future sense, if Rashford didn't get injured, he went to be top goal scorer, and he did that for like the next season or two as well. Then, you know, all of a sudden when Rashford is on that level, now we're gonna put Rashford over Rooney. Personally, I still wouldn't, because, you know, I think there was no player like Wayne Rooney.
I think in the last decade I still would, because moving away from pedigree, in the last decade, he was extremely consistent. He scored an insane amount of goals. He scored so many different goals. So I still would put him in, even if let's just say Rashford was top goal scorer for 2 seasons, because I think stats-wise and pedigree within the last decade, Rooney is still better.
Yeah, that would be your opinion, but, you know, I was just saying, it still counts.
Wayne Rooney would get to my Premier League all-time team, definitely.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, but I'd have to think about that.
I mean, there are Agueros out there, but anyways, we're not here to talk about Aguero.
Yeah, but definitely at his prime, he was the best striker in the world. He scored every type of goal. He was the best striker in the world.
Those goals won us the league.
Yeah, well, okay. So who are we going with next to Wayne Rooney is the real question.
This is the split one. This was tough.
I thought I was going to
This
see Van
was-
Persie, but I'm
This was
I'm
tough.
waiting to see.
This
I'm
one
pretty
was
sure you're going
tough.
to see Van Persie from.
Because I love Moloto's choice as well. But I love the player I
Favorite?
chose. It's very tough. I think this one came down to who liked the most. I think Moloto liked this guy more, and I like who started.
No, actually.
Berbatov. Interesting.
no,
Yeah, very underrated.
Really, that was
Very
hard.
underrated.
This is the hardest one for me.
Berbatov versus Van Persie. Interesting. Yeah, well, I mean, if you're looking for something to say from me, is that I'm speechless. I don't know what to say, so I'll let you do take the floor.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, you
Beyond-
go first. This one was tough for me, so you.
Okay, Van Persie, probably my
I think
favorite
it just comes on
striker
purpose.
ever in United. I love Van Persie. And he came in and did a job and won the Premier League for us. He really did. But these two players are so similar. They're so similar. Yes, I think Berbatov has been more agile than Van Persie, but they're both such good strikers of the ball, and they're both poachers in their own right. So I think it was a hard one. But for me, I feel like Berbatov did it longer than Van Persie. Van Persie did it for one season. It was literally one season. After that, he was done. Yes, injuries played a part, but after that, he was done. Berbatov scored a lot of goals. Just in the last decade, it was 58 goals. And I'm not going to include before that, but there was more. But just in the last decade, it was 58 goals. And him and Wayne Rooney were a powerful pairing for a long time.
At United specifically, yeah, I would have to go with Berbatov. But overall, that's another conversation for another day because unlike Berbatov, Van Persie actually played at another big Premier League club and proved his pedigree elsewhere. And I know it's not about that. That's why I'm not going to go there because we're focusing on the last decade as we've established. So, I'll just reserve my thoughts because there are no thoughts.
I feel like we score for choice.
Yeah,
This guy was a really good player,
one
but
was really good.
so many good players at this club. He's very underrated.
No, yeah, it's Berbatov.
He's definitely underrated.
This is why striker is my favorite position because I grew up watching people like the Wayne Rooney's, Berbatovs, Van Persie's at my team, and Michael Owen for that few seasons he was there. But this one was tough. How many goals you said Berbatov had again?
In the last decade, there's 58. In the Premier League.
So that's.
I didn't count any other.
And how many seasons did you play that decade? If you know.
It was a few, I think. 4 or something.
So, what I will say is, Van Persie came to United 3 seasons and he scored 48 goals, 10 less than Berbatov. But for me, Van Persie is my type of striker. Like Ferguson said it himself when he bought Robert Van Persie, we're going to win the league if you give him the ball. This guy won us the Premier League that season. Out of this world, Robin Van Persie. I think it was class. I think even when Alex Ferguson left, he chipped in with a few goals, even with his age. It just was a madness. And I was going to say I was going to put Zlatan for the lols, but I was like, nah, I can't disrespect my boy Robin Van Persie. I really do love Robin Van Persie. One of my favorite strikers, without a doubt.
Like in that one season, he won the Premier League for us. Like he was out of the I can't really compare him.
He's world class.
But after that, yes, he took the goals here and there, but like he was doing nothing else really. Like he was visibly on the decline.
No, he was definitely on the decline. But if he has 10 less goals still than a Berbatov and played less seasons, I mean, that's ridiculous.
How many less though?
10.
I think
10
it's
less goals. He's got 48 goals in the Premier League.
Yeah, but Zlatan's better because he won a Europa League, so this argument's done.
Zlatan is too much.
Sorry?
I said Zlatan won a Europa League, so this argument's done. He's better than both of them.
Was Berbatov there when you won the Champions League? I'm not completely sure.
When we won the Champions
League,
I think
when it comes to
Berbatov.
United strikers, trophies are kind of irrelevant because they speak for themselves.
Yeah, they speak for themselves. These two speak for themselves. Like, this is just what you would prefer. And, it's funny enough because I think my one uncle, if I have to ask him to choose between Berbatov and Van Persie, I don't think he could choose. I honestly don't think he could choose.
Right, it's a really tough one.
This one was my toughest one for sure. 100%. But the one thing I will say, just to finish off, the thing that was not tough, this is the manager.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's done. It's done. I don't have no words. This picture speaks for itself. Thank you, guys. I bless you.
Moyes? Dude, I think Moyes is an argument. I think Moyes is an argument. Moyes deserves time. I think if Moyes got more time...
No, won an FA
He would have won 3 back-to-back trebles. He would have won 3 back-to-back trebles. You guys are sleeping on Moyes. I'm telling you. Moyes would have won 3 back-to-back trebles. Don't at me.
This guy made me fall into it, guys. This guy was one of the big reasons I fell in love with this club. You know, like I said, I cannot thank this man enough for the memories he's given me. So, Alex, you're the GOAT, my friend. You'll always be the GOAT in my eyes.
Yeah, no question, no argument.
No argument.
Yeah. I think that about wraps up the show, right? There's nothing else to say after this.
There's nothing else to say, boys. This picture sums it up. Our whole decade and the decades before that, this picture sums it up.
Actually, you know, since we're done with the team of the decade, for the lulz, actually, Liverpool, they thought they were going to be the treble winners. They got knocked out of the FA Cup. And then they're like, it's okay. We'll do the double. We'll settle for the double. And then they got knocked out of the Champions League. And then they were like, okay, fine. We're not going to do the double. We're not going to do the treble. But we're still going to go invincible. And then they lost to Watford. And then they were like, okay, finally, you know, you've taken everything away from us. You've taken the treble. You've taken the double. You've taken away the invincibles. We're going to win the Premier League. And then, brothers, COVID came. And then they were like, okay, we're not going to win the Premier League yet, but we're going to continue the season. And then COVID was like, the season suspended indefinitely. I don't know what Liverpool fans are saying now, but if there are any Liverpool fans listening to this,
if you're watching this, look at this picture. You will never get this, ever. Fucking Prince.
No, but on a more serious note, what are your opinions on the season? And let us know in the comments down below if there are any Liverpool fans watching by any chance. And if you think that the season should continue because your team was definitely going to win the Premier League beyond a shadow of a doubt, what about West Brom? Let us know in the comments down below. Shouldn't West Brom also get their title because they were ahead in the lower division, and they too deserve that trophy? And then what happens with Bournemouth and Norwich and those teams? You know, I'd like to know your opinions genuinely. I'm not being an asshole. I just want to know your opinions.
My genuine opinion is where I'm at is I really miss football. I want it back. I would love the season to continue, obviously, because I did think United were building on something. We were still in all the competitions as well. So I thought, you know, we could really go on and win some trophies. And I think Oli could have finished his story and maybe changed my opinions later on. It's very unfortunate, but I would like the season to continue. But then again, if the season didn't continue and everything got voided, I still got no complaints. Liverpool didn't get the title, and I couldn't care less.
Yeah, I guess that's the only positive. But I'd also like
that's
to
the only positive I have if the season got voided.
I want to ask the question before you go off air. Does Van Dijk replace any of those two in that pairing that we chose?
No. Listen. Here's the thing. Right? Here's the thing. Okay, and then a lot of people are going to be cringing at this video right now. But here's the thing. All these people talk about Van Dijk this, Van Dijk that, Van Dijk this, Van Dijk that. And I'm like, there's a lot of prime centre-backs I would rather have over Van Dijk. Like a lot. I can name a lot. Genuinely, I'm not even joking. Ramos, bro. Ramos. I would take Ramos over Van Dijk any day of the week. I would take Varane.
I'm sorry. I'm leaving.
Yeah, I'll take Varane. I would take Varane over. Varane has not lost a final. Varane has not lost a final.
3 times in a row. Ramos did it 3 times in a row.
Varane has not lost a final.
Look, I think that's I have a very tactical brain, and like all of those become irrelevant when I look at the attributes. To be honest, yes, obviously they play a part, but I feel like each of the attributes.
Look, we can all sit on our high horses and say, "Oh, I have a tactical brain. I have a tactical brain, and I think attributes-wise, Van Dijk is better." And yeah, if you're talking about attributes, it always comes down to preference. But attributes contribute to a team performance. And when you're talking about a player in Sergio Ramos who has won 3 Champions Leagues back-to-back, 1, 2 has won a World Cup, 3 has a guy next to him who has never lost a final in professional football, never lost a final, a competitive match to conclude a tournament. He has never lost. He's won a World Cup and 3 Champions Leagues as well, by the way. When you put those two next to each other, there is no competition in terms of, like, yeah, Van Dijk is an amazing defender and he's probably the best defender in the world attributes-wise. But if you're asking me, what would I rather have? Van Dijk with another person next to him, of Varane and Ramos next to each other, as a coach and as a person and in terms of preference, I would go with Varane and Ramos. Why? Why would I go with Varane and Ramos? Ramos
Because they're proven, yeah.
brings the aggression. Varane brings the brains. Together, they go well. They go well, really well. Like I don't think I need to justify that because I've already mentioned their accolades. Yes, Van Dijk got nominated for Ballon d'Or. Yes, Van Dijk plays for the Liverpool team that just won the Champions League. Yes, Van Dijk plays in the defensive team that was going to go on and go invincible to many accounts before they lost to Watford. But what does that really mean in the grander scheme of things compared to what Van Dijk and Varane, compared to Ramos, what Ramos has done in his career and what Varane has done in his career, in his short career? Nothing.
Look,
nothing.
Maybe
that comes down to attributes.
I think I didn't really ask it properly. In terms of pairing, yes, brilliant. They complement each other well, Varane and Sergio Ramos. In terms of pairing, Ferdinand and Vidic complement each other perfectly. Ferdinand, the pace, and then the brains, actually the complete package in Vidic. And Ferdinand would make up for where he lacked a little bit. What I was asking is that would Van Dijk be so, I don't want to say similar, but Van Dijk and Vidic, one could say, are the perfect defenders. They're so complete. Would they be so complete? Is it very possible there could be a better pairing than what Ferdinand and Vidic were? That's what I was asking.
It is possible.
No, I don't think so. Because you know what? I say why I don't think so. Because height-wise, Rio Ferdinand was also a giant. He's very similar to Van Dijk. He's faster than Van Dijk. I think he read the game better than Van Dijk. I still think he's a better leader than Van Dijk, better tackler than Van Dijk, and I think he made less mistakes than Van Dijk.
I only agree with the pace there and the leadership.
Look, we can sit here till the cows come home and say, oh, does Van Dijk slide tackle better than Sergio Ramos? Does he do that better? Let's go watch some videos and measure it with the freaking whatever device you use to measure who tackles better. But that's childish because Ramos, Varane, Van Dijk, Vidic, Ferdinand, you could add Puyol in there. I don't want to add PK because there's mixed opinions about PK and whether or not he's actually at that level, even though PK was in the team that won the World Cup and was in the team that won the Champions League for Barca. My point is there's a lot of defenders we could add into this conversation, right? And when you're talking about who would replace Vidic and Ferdinand, right? In terms of similarity, Van Dijk is a great replacement, but I think there are so many other ways to think about it, man. There really are. And when you're talking about world-class defenders, it really doesn't matter. It's like I have a Ferrari. What do you want to replace it with? A Porsche engine or a Bugatti engine? It's like, yeah, the Bugatti is probably better in terms of your preference, but the Porsche is still a Porsche. What are you complaining about, you know? And it's like, are we really going to sit and bicker about what's better between two engines that are both in their prime? It doesn't make sense. You know, so the whole thing
but we're doing like a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you.
No, I think we're doing like a whole best 11 thing. So it's about thinking and seeing and wondering. So obviously, there's no complaints. Who wouldn't take Varane and Sergio Ramos?
Yeah, but my point to that is, for people who say if you have a football brain, you pick Van Dijk, and it's like, but if you have a football brain, you know Ramos is one of the best defenders in the world. So what's your point? And people get so caught up in this, oh, I have a tactical mind, I have a football brain, and I know that Van Dijk attributes-wise is better than Ramos and would fit better in this pairing. It's like, no, you don't. That's what you think because that's what you prefer. But the stats don't lie. The pedigree doesn't lie. And even if you ignore the stats and the pedigree, Ramos is an amazing defender. He's a hard freaking worker. Ramos can get on the end of crosses just as well as Van Dijk
Ramos would make Van Dijk.
And I will show you videos. I can send you videos where Ramos literally kept his team in games using his head on the other end of a corner. Remember the final against Atletico Madrid?
Final. Like, that was the one. Final. Where I was like, it's done. And my team is going to lose the final.
One of the most
and then I came back and I was like, let me just watch the last corner.
You know, look, as far as I'm concerned, Ramos in the air is, in his prime at least, is really good because he does score a lot of goals with headers. I don't know how well Van Dijk does in the air, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't score as often as Ramos.
He doesn't score as often as Ramos, but he does well.
Yeah, so in the air, personally, in terms of longevity in the whole career,
I feel like Ramos would make Van Dijk crack.
I think Ramos is more aggressive and he's more of a nutcase. Yes, Van Dijk, you need someone next to Vidic who's a bit less of a nut job.
Yeah, like, you know, Vidic and Ramos next to
So
each other.
maybe Vidic and Ramos wouldn't work as well. But Ramos and Ferdinand could. So, you know,
Look,
it all comes down to preference.
Ramos is a brilliant defender, but out of this world. But I just prefer Van Dijk, to be honest. And I think if you have to compare them, I feel like Van Dijk is everything Ramos is without the aggression and being a hothead.
Yeah, you're 100% right, and that's why I like Varane next to the Ramos. But yeah, you're 100% right. But you know, sometimes some coaches want a nutcase. Some coaches like.
I want a nutcase. I want a Ramos.
Some people like a nutcase. Some people actually like Pepe. Remember Pepe from Real Madrid? Some people actually prefer having a defender who's a nut job, at least one, because it adds an element to the team, to a winning team.
That's why I like Ashley Young when he was at United. He was the only scumbag.
Exactly. You need, some people prefer having a scumbag in their defense because it just brings that little bit of zest, that little bit of ferocity, that little bit of passion to a winning team. And that comes down to preference, but that doesn't mean you have less of a tactical brain. You know, it doesn't mean you don't have a football mind, and anyone with a football mind can see that Van Dijk gets in. Oh, rubbish. Get off your high horse. Get off your snobbery, you bloody Liverpool fans, and realize that Van Dijk is not invincible. If he was,
yeah. Plus, if you look at this season, Van Dijk hasn't been the same. Like, he's been kind of average this season.
Yeah, but look,
I think
it's all down to opinion.
Maybe not as good as last season, but I think he's pretty good.
He's been good, and look, I will say it as a Sergio Ramos fan. Van Dijk at the moment is probably the best defender in the world because Sergio Ramos is on the decline. He is on the decline, but you ain't ever gonna hear me say I prefer Van Dijk over Ramos because I am a huge Ramos fan, and it's
a major Ramos fan.
It's gonna get to the point where I'm gonna say, yeah, obviously now because of old age, I have to take Van Dijk. Like, I'm not going to be that stupid. Like, I'm not going to take a 38-year-old Ramos over Van Dijk. Yeah. I'm not that stubborn and that thick-headed. But, you know, since we're talking about prime players in a team of the decade, I think it's fair to compare the prime Sergio Ramos with the now Van Dijk, who we think is the prime Van Dijk. And when it comes to that,
it's nice. That's the amazing thing about Van Dijk as well. He's still pretty young.
I mean, look, these debates often come about the name rather than the person. But if you're talking about attributes, there's a lot of different. Again, I'm sounding like a broken record now because I'm going to say there's a lot of different attributes that could work well. You know, it's about if you remove Vidic, who do you put next to Ferdinand? Do you really want Van Dijk and Ferdinand playing together if they're so similar? Probably not. You probably want that pairing. You want that dynamic. You want someone who's a hothead and someone who's more calm.
On paper, if I had to choose someone to replace that Ferdinand and Vidic, I'd put Ramos on paper. But, like, you know, in real life, it probably wouldn't work out. They would just,
I know you can't.
So in terms of Ferdinand, in terms of replacing Ferdinand, I would put Van Dijk. But in terms of replacing Vidic, I would take Ramos because I would want to replace a hothead with a hothead, and I would want to place a calm guy with a calm guy.
Ramos gets in my all-time team. Let's just put it that way.
Would you rather have two players who complement each other, or two players who are close? You're kind of perfect, but who are close to being the perfect defender.
Two players who complement each other. That's my thing. That's my theory. I've always said that. You know, I've even said that when we talked about Paul Pogba on the show. People are like, should Paul Pogba stay? Should Paul Pogba go? And I'm like, mate, I would love Paul Pogba to fucking stay, but we don't need him just because he's the best player. You don't need the best player in your midfield. You need a midfield that works well together. I'm all about a defense and a midfield and an attack that complements each other rather than just putting 11 of the best players together. I'm all about that. So when it comes to selecting the two, I'm not going to pick Ramos over Van Dijk just because my ego wants me to pick Ramos. Again, if we're replacing Vidic, I replace him with Ramos. If we're replacing Ferdinand, I replace him with Vidic. Replace like for like so that you have a complementary partnership. I would never put Vidic and Ramos right next to each other because that's just a disaster. Even though I want to, I would never do it. You know, that's just a disaster. Yeah. I think it's just wiser to replace whoever you're replacing, look for a player who's as similar as possible. And I think you hit it hammer on the head. Van Dijk and Ferdinand.
Can I ask this? Very similar.
Yeah.
How was Sergio Ramos and Pepe?
Sergio Ramos and Pepe was a mad fucking duo. And I did not like that defensive duo. Because as much as I like Ramos, I never really liked Pepe. And I know that sounds like a bit of a paradox, but I can explain and say that Pepe hasn't quite reached the heights that Ramos has. I mean, not just statistically, but as a player,
they were
I
very
think
similar.
Pepe. They were very similar, but
Extreme.
Ramos was a bit more of a leader than Pepe was. Pepe was just, to me, Pepe was a very emotional player. So is Ramos, but Ramos's emotion and aggression was directed more towards being productive. Whereas Pepe was just a real nut job. Like, you want to talk about
Pepe
nut
is
jobs?
scumbag of the year, boys.
He's scumbag of the year. Ramos is a red card waiting to happen, but Ramos would never get a red card okay, actually, no, that's not true. He got a red card in the final against Liverpool. Was it a yellow card that he got against Mo Salah, or was it a red card?
Yeah, yellow.
It was a yellow. Okay, so Ramos, unlike Pepe, has a line. You know, Ramos has a line. As much as people don't want to buy it, Ramos has a line, guys. You know, and Ramos has more to offer.
You know,
Ramos
he's very
going
smart
forward
about
was
the way
better
he
than
does
Pepe.
it.
Yeah, he's very intelligent about the way he does it.
Like when he did it to Salah, you could see he was very smart. Like he knew exactly what he was doing, but he did it in a way where the ref was like, okay, I'm gonna have to like 50-50.
Yeah,
not just like that. You know, go.
The thing about Pepe also, he's very similar to Bailey in that Pepe would just throw his body into tackles. Ramos very seldom gets injured, you know. So Ramos was very different to Pepe, and I think the reason why that duo worked was because of Ramos, not because of Pepe. Put Pepe in any other team, and he's just a proper nut job. Exhibit A. He didn't really work well at Portugal, did he?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
He didn't really work well at Portugal. He needed someone who was a bit level-headed, and that's the thing about Ramos. He's a very versatile defender. Ramos can be a nut job when he has to be, but if he needs to be the calm guy, if he needs to wear the captain's armband, he can do that as well. Ramos is very calm when he plays for Spain. You've never seen Ramos flying in and getting a red card at Spain. No, because he understands what's at stake. And you'll never see Ramos doing something like that in a final, except for the thing against Mo Salah, which was calculated anyways. So yeah, I think I was never a huge fan of Pepe because Pepe reminded me a lot of Bailey. You know, at least Bailey plays for my club and I like Bailey. But like, you know, if I wasn't a United fan, I'd probably be looking at Bailey and being like, this guy reminds me of Pepe. Because he just doesn't know how to look after himself. Being splits on the football field and getting stepped on.
Yeah, and Pepe was mad.
And also, I don't know if this is relevant, but I don't think Pepe was quite as, you know, marketable as Ramos. I don't know if that's offensive to say or not, but I just don't think Pepe had that thing. Whereas, you know, when you see Ramos walking with the shirt, you're like, this is my cap.
Nah, he's class.
He's class. And then you look at Pepe and you're like, ish. With the bald head, even the prison cut. I don't know. I don't know if that's offensive to say.
Now I'll be honest. I'll put my hands up. I'm going to be very biased towards Ramos because I love Ramos.
Yeah, I don't even think it's being biased at this point because, like, he's done these things. We're not.
He's done everything.
We're looping up Ramos because he's actually led teams to trophies. We're looping up Ramos because his aggression is actually calculated, and I think nobody can deny that Sergio Ramos is in his prime.
Yeah, that's why I said when Van Dijk got nominated for the Ballon d'Or, I'm like, that's so unfair. How come Ramos? If Van Dijk wins it, how come Ramos never got one?
Yeah, like, you know, not forget Ramos. There's so many defenders who deserved to be where Van Dijk is right now and never got it.
Yeah.
That was simply down to attribute, really. It was simply down to what the stats are saying. Really. Like,
it makes sense.
They're all good defenders. Look at Van Dijk's stats. They're just out of this world. Yeah.
So that's the thing. That's where I start to cringe and I hate stats a lot because statistically, you can look at Van Dijk and he happened to be good in the areas where the stats picked it up. For example, let me explain that. I wanna just bear with me now. Bear with me. Let's look at midfielders, right? How many midfielders that are underrated don't really show up when it comes to stats because they're never in the final third delivering the final ball. For example, Michael Carrick. Michael Carrick didn't get as many assists as he possibly could have because he was always the pass leading to the assist rather than the actual assist. Therefore, he didn't appear on the stat sheet. But we all know that Michael Carrick, at least those of us who watched him, was an amazing midfielder, right? But statistically, you can't prove that because statistically, he wasn't someone who got a lot of assists. And in terms of a DM, he wasn't really physical like a Kante. He wasn't present. He was just a quiet guy, Mr. Composure, Mr. Ice in his veins. And that can't be measured by stats. It's the same with Martial. You can't measure how many times a player holds up the ball and what work a player does off the ball. Therefore, someone like a Firmino will seem better because he seems to get more assists. And I mean, like, over his career. I'm not just talking about this season. So I think it's the same thing with Van Dijk and other defenders. You know, you can't measure calculated aggression. There's no stats for how many times Ramos has intelligently fouled someone, and it's led to Real Madrid winning the game. There's no stat for that. But I, as a person who's watched Ramos throughout his career, there's been many times where I'm like, shit, I can't believe this guy just did that.
But even with the stats, my stats, I'll keep it like, Ramos will still have more goals. He probably still has more assists. Ramos is about in his 30s. Van Dijk isn't young. He's turning 29 this season. But Ramos is one who knows how many Champions Leagues, how many leagues.
The thing is, that's when it becomes a bit unfair because, for me, the World Cup is about the team.
For me, I know Van Dijk is great and everything, and I'm biased and stuff. But when you compare Van Dijk to Ramos, I'm like,
I think that's a bit unfair. I think you can because this goes back to the whole Gary Neville and Aaron Wan-Bissaka thing. You have to give credit where credit's due, and Van Dijk is an amazing defender. Forget the Champions Leagues, forget the World Cups, because those are team accomplishments. In terms of individual statistics, Van Dijk can be compared to Ramos. I will give you credit there. And at the end of the day, I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm obviously going to say Ramos is better because I like him, but you can't objectively say Ramos is better, prime Ramos is better than prime Van Dijk just because he's won more World Cups or Champions League. That's unfair because that goes back to the Pogba and De Bruyne thing. Who's better?
Yeah.
The guy who won the Premier League or the guy who won the World Cup? Who's better? Because they both polar opposite.
Okay, I've got one more question. One last question.
Yeah.
Does Van Dijk, in your opinion, get in centre-back pairing of the decade?
In
For what?
If you had to choose one. In general.
In general, I would put Van Dijk and Ramos next to each other if I could. I would put Van Dijk and Ramos next to each other, genuinely, if I could, of the decade. Yes. Genuinely.
Yeah, I'd possibly agree with that. Yeah, Van Dijk and
I'll put them together, but if you're forcing me to pick one, dude, if you're
forcing me to pick one, I'll pick Ramos. It's not even a question.
Because I'm a Ramos fan. That again is down to the thing about who do you like more. And that doesn't mean I think
about a pairing. So,
pairing.
Is there no shot for Vidic?
There is, but
do I really want to put Vidic and Ramos together? On paper, I would love to do it.
The decade. Listen, if we're going off the last 20 years, then maybe we have to put Vidic and Ferdinand and a couple of other guys in that conversation. But this decade specifically, I have to put Ramos in, and I have to put Van Dijk in because he's the only defender that's been nominated for Ballon d'Or in God knows how long. And they've both won Champions Leagues. One of them has won a World Cup. One of them has won a few league titles, I think. Not sure. Because I don't really know what the situation is with Real Madrid in the La Liga. I think Barca has been dominating the La Liga. But look, it's hard. And it will come down to preference because, what about guys like PK? Again, and I know PK is controversial, but PK has won a World Cup. PK has won a Champions League. Van Dijk can't say the same.
PK has won everything as well. He's won everything.
Yeah.
PK is a good defender, but I don't think he's in that bracket. I think he's just below.
A lot of people will say he's below, but in terms of defensive pairings, I think you slap someone next to PK and you have an argument. It's just who do you put next to PK, and that's why I want to put PK in this conversation because I don't know who you put next to PK besides Puyol, prime Puyol. Prime Puyol and prime PK.
Down, he doesn't have a
brilliant part. To answer your question, on paper, if I could, and then ideal world, I would put Vidic and Ramos. Because those are my two type of centre backs. In a fantasy world, that would be my defense.
Vidic and Ramos would be my dream pairing in a fantasy world.
Those games on your phone, Dream League Soccer and all those things. That's where I have a Vidic and I have a Ramos.
Yeah. Like top 11 manager, I would put prime Vidic and prime Ramos. In FIFA, I would run that 100%. Not against real people, but against the AI, obviously. Because against real people, that would be a nightmare. But in a fantasy team, I would put Vidic and Ramos. In a realistic team, if I'm the manager of this top 11 team that's going to be playing against another top 11 team, and I have the first pick of a defensive pairing over the last decade, and I could pull those athletes out of their prime, I would put Van Dijk and Ramos next to each other, if I could, if it was an option, if it was possible. As a manager, and that's me tactically speaking, but in terms of fantasy and what I just want to see, mesh, no matter what, then because this is similar to the Messi and Ronaldo argument, right? Tactically, would you put Messi and Ronaldo in the same team? Probably not, because you probably wouldn't need to. But who wouldn't want to see those two play together as a fantasy? Yeah, imagine that. So it's a similar thing. Not the exact same thing, but it's a similar thing. You'd want to see Messi and Ronaldo play together, but it doesn't make sense. Because why would you do that, as a manager? Why on earth would you do that? There's no way to justify it. There's so many other ways to make that team without Messi or without Ronaldo, whoever you prefer, and
It'll
build a
work,
team.
but you don't need to.
Yeah, you don't need to. Exactly. You know, in theory, Vidic and Ramos could work if you just played a back five. In theory, and put someone in the middle to keep them in check. In theory, but why would you do that when you could just put Van Dijk and Ramos together
Imagine
and save
Vidic,
the man?
Vidic, Cesar Ramos, and Van Dijk. Oh my gosh!
And then who would you put as right back?
I'm not turning
Aaron
up for that
Wan-Bissaka
game.
and Trent Alexander-Arnold
The opponent.
as wingbacks.
And then maybe Prime Danielle, to be honest.
Prime Danny Alves. That's a good.
I'd play Trent there because you don't really need Wan-Bissaka in that situation.
Nah, you don't need to. You don't need any more defense. No more defense, please, I beg.
Prime Trent and Prime Danny Alves. Damn. I think. Look, I don't know what you think of this because you're a Barca fan, and I'm surprised you never brought this guy up once today. I don't know what you think of Jordi Alba, but in terms of left backs, Prime Jordi Alba has an argument. You know,
he's top class, one of the best we've seen this decade.
Yeah, but who else besides Alexandro maybe comes close to Prime?
I don't even think Alessandro.
Alexandro's
maybe the same as the Van Dijk argument because he's got the attributes, but maybe not the achievements.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's the same thing. It's interesting. We need to actually think about doing that.
Back,
oh no,
mine's Alaba.
Yes, exactly.
Alaba. Yeah, Alaba. I forgot about that guy. Yeah. Alaba. I would take Alba, not Alaba, but Alaba would work as well. And that's not because I think Alaba.
Unless the new left back.
What's the name? Worse.
At Bayern. What's the guy's name? The kid. I love that.
Davies.
Kid. Yeah.
Davies.
Unless he grows up
Davies.
to be. Yeah, you know what?
The Canadian guy. Yeah. Yeah, the Canadian kid.
Yeah.
Something
Dangerous.
Yeah, well, listen, I think we've dragged the show on too long. Please do leave a like on the video. Please do subscribe. Let us know in the comments down below if you would like us to do a all-round team of the decade. I really enjoyed the last portion of the show.
How
so
many
I think
United players will get in an all-time team?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a question for another show. I don't know. I think that's going to drag the show on way too long if we answer that right now.
So, if you guys want us to do that. How many United players get into
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but that's a video idea. That's a video idea. Please do smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Share the content. If you made it to the end of the video, you're a legend. We love you. And peace out. Hopefully you're staying safe, by the way. Thoughts and prayers to anyone who's going through the virus we shall not mention on the show. Yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. And peace out.